Good morning, and welcome back to Jack's Coffee Break. Today's episode is very special. It's the first ever comment or requested zoo that I've ever done. This particular one was requested by 3DPDK. So this fellow left a wonderful comment, telling me a little bit about one of the memories that they had from when they were a kid, going to the zoo. Of course, you know, I think we've all got a few of them, and so they're all very special, and so this was one of those that I was like, ooh, alrighty, this is going to be interesting, and I should take it seriously. So, rather than me trying to paraphrase, Raven, if you will please go ahead and give us the comment.
Someone called 3DPDK has issued us a challenge. They wrote, "I have a challenge for you." Forgive the long post, but I want to explain this fully. My earliest memories of a zoo is the Philadelphia Zoo in the 1960s. The most delightful thing to my 6-year-old mind was that at the main entrance, the visitors walked to the various areas of the zoo, accompanied by swans, ducks, geese, and peacocks. The main path bordered and bridged a small pond and a grassy garden area with no barriers to separate the birds from the people. I'm guessing that some of the ducks and geese were wild, but had decided not to migrate because of the abundance of year-round food. As far as I can remember, the birds, mostly the peacocks, would wander throughout the entire zoo unrestricted. The San Diego Zoo also had unrestricted flamingos at its entrance, but they seemed to remain close to the feeding area. Although not a zoo, the governor's mansion in Williamsburg, Virginia, has a formal garden and hedge maze in the backyard where peacocks wander freely. In my buildings, I can't help myself but construct a formal garden area where I keep the base game peafowl and flamingos. This garden is not made in organic shapes, but usually reminiscent to the classic Renaissance gardens of France and Italy, with trained hedges, sculptures, and fountains, and geometric pathing. The whole area is square or rectangle with boundary made from the hedge barrier. Guest gates are located on all 4 sides, sometimes 2 sets on the long side of the rectangle. I try to use only the plants of the region the zoo is located. I can spend days, sometimes weeks, planting all the gardens within this peacock garden. It is usually the most visited area in the zoo. The only time I made a more organic type peacock garden was when I assumed my zoo was located somewhere along the U.S. Gulf Coast, featuring a lot of cypress trees, wisteria, ivy, and poisoned upside down grass plants in the branches of the trees. Sort of looks like Spanish moss. And a lot of marsh-type plants. So, the challenge that they have given us. Number 1, the basic challenge. As an artist, I believe you are fully capable, is to design and build a convincing formal Renaissance garden, complete with center gazebo. Mine is usually based on Roman architecture, sporting a fountain or a statue tribute to the birds found in the garden. Create your own fountain using the construction parts, existing fountains, or geometric terrain. Shapes filled with water using mist, jet, and splash water particle effects. Include lighting throughout suitable for highlighting such a garden. Usually a lot of path lighting. Hint, the small triangular path light turned on its end makes a decent subtle short-range spotlight. Good to know. Number 2. The difficult challenge is an exercise in stepping around the game's constraints. Figure out a way to allow the peacocks and flamingos to wander around the entire zoo. Call it the Philly Zoo Challenge. Ordinarily, if a peacock or flamingo gets out of the garden, its main enclosure, it is considered to be an escaped animal. The visitors don't freak out over it, but it can cost money to retrieve, and it's just a pain in the butt. The hint is that 2 enclosures can share a barrier wall. The other problem is that if you solve the barrier problem, the birds will wander so far away that they are no longer being fed. And if you place feeder bowls around the zoo, the keeper can, in some cases, become confused who the bowls are meant to feed. There's a way to do it. I've done it. But it is tedious unless you plan for it when you first start the zoo and expand as you develop the zoo. I don't exactly know how to do it, but I want to take them up on this, so I'm going to get this done. So saith Jackal. Anyway, that is the challenge that has been issued. And enjoy watching the hilarious hilarious attempt to get this started.
Excellent. So if there's anything that I've learned, it's that when somebody, usually older than you, asks you to do something especially technical or complicated, or in this case challenging in a game, I have found that in every situation, or almost every situation, it will result in your skills naturally increasing and discovering and learning new things. So this was definitely one that I was like, ooh, I have to do this. Because this is a thing that I've dreamt about doing, but have never quite figured out, and now I have reason, and even better yet, they've said they've done it, which means it's possible. Which was sort of where I was stumped, was I wasn't sure if it was possible. I'd never seen anybody do it. So, naturally, the first thing that I did was break out a test zoo, and let me go ahead and show you what I figured out. Alrighty, so here we are in the test version of this map. So this is clearly not the same layout or format that we're going to be following. This was entirely just to test if it can be done and how you would put out the formatting. So over here would be the entrance of the zoo, and then right here would be the main gate where you would walk in. And then of course naturally you're going to be greeted by a guest shop, because that is the staple I've seen in every zoo. A restaurant over here, and then in the back we've got our main staff buildings, and we have our 3 major birds. So unfortunately, until we give the modders a little bit of time, we're not going to have ducks and geese in the game, but what we do have are the mute swan, which I'm so excited for. They look incredible. They're just... like, of all the birds that we could have gotten in-game, I don't know why this one is the one that I'm like, I wasn't expecting it. And here it is. And it's got my brain running. Here's the peacock. I like these birds to a certain extent, but as I've mentioned on the channel before, I grew up in a neighborhood infested by them in Florida, and so my love is tempered with experience. And then, very similar, the flamingo. We had flamingos in Florida as well, mostly at the zoos, but occasionally they'd escape. And we occasionally had the greater flamingos, but we mostly had pinks. It was a lot of pink flamingo. It was like our staple bird. So, all 3 of these birds I've got some experience with, which is kind of cool. Normally I don't have personal experience with any of the animals that I work with. I do with these, and that's been a lot of fun. So, first things first, dealing with that second outline, that making a zoo where the birds can wander freely, that was intriguing. So, of course, if we're going to have like a little lake or fountain or water-based entrance, I wanted to have a nice big area where the birds could wander around and have all kinds of space available to them. So I built a little bridge, built what would be like an entrance plots, and then back here would be more habitats. And what I've discovered is that you can absolutely make a single continuous habitat exhibit, but it requires a specific kind of style. So let me pull up a bit of an example for you. Okay, so here I have pulled up, you're familiar with this design. It's called a tribal tattoo. And I've worked with these a little bit before. My husband uses some of this style in his leatherworking. He mostly does like Celtic knotwork. And the main thing that defines it is you have essentially contiguous areas of black and contiguous areas of white, and for the most part you don't have areas where either the black is wholly contained or the white is wholly contained. It's a little bit like, it's a bit like yin and yang, a little bit, but for the most part, like, you don't see in this one you've got these contained areas through here. Usually you don't have that. This is sort of it's an option, but this style right here where nothing is particularly contained and everything lines up against each other, this is what we're looking for. And it's a little bit hard to parse because everything's angular and flowing and all that kind of stuff, but there's sort of these sorts of root areas where it all just sort of flows from. Usually it's center located, and then everything sort of goes up and down. So this is basically how we need to design our habitat barriers, is that if we imagine that the space that the peacocks and swans and all them can wander through are like this section right here, this black section, right? Okay. And it's all contiguous. It goes off in different directions, but then within it are contained these spaces, these sort of larger blocky white spaces, where we might add other habitats, you know, things like our lions, tigers, bears, whatever. This is what we're looking at for our design style. And so this is basically what I've done over here. Now, as they rightly point out, you can have barriers that connect up to habitats, but depending on how many times you do it, it can overflow the system. So, for example, here is a potential contained habitat within the same boundary area. In fact, let me go to barriers so you can see. So it's connecting these two spaces, all right? But what this means also is that when we look at it from kind of a larger picture, is that we're making kind of a tree branch situation where the pathing is allowed to connect in concentric circles. See, we have a loop right here, but the bird's boundary is not allowed to connect through this concentric circle. And the reason why is because of how barriers work. So let me pull out, in fact, let's stick with an old barrier and we'll stay within the barrier tab, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Because of the fact that I build mostly with null barriers, they're both more flexible and come with slightly more rules than you would expect to see. So here is... Oh, come on, you. Get over there. They're over there. There we go. Okay. So let's place down a habitat, right? This is a fully functional, completely working habitat. That's great. If I place down more barriers inside this space, let's say that I place a box in here. There we go. And I try and place down a barrier. I can. That is now habitat 8. Here's habitat 7. It's kind of functioning, isn't it? Was this updated? This did not work previously at all. Am I learning something right here on the screen? This did not used to work. Let's do this. Let's go into facilities. Let's grab a trade center. Right, okay. Let's do our path. Let's go into barriers. Let's add a guest barrier right here. Okay. Let's do a path right here. Let's connect these two up. Let's hire a vet. Okay, animal trading. Do we have any birds in storage? We do. So let's grab a flamingo. And let's take our flamingo. Oh, you're currently being moved. Okay, so let's grab that flamingo and let's grab I don't know, an aardvark. Sure. Nice and distinguishable from each other. Flamingo, aardvark. Okay. I want to send... Oh, let's let them land. Okay, send to zoo. Let's move that one to habitat 7. Okay. And now, let's send the aardvark to habitat 8. Can we do it? Can we contain a habitat in a habitat? No, let's just double check something. I had turned escapes off so that way they would stay in this contained area. Let's go ahead, turn escapes back on. Because I want to know if this flamingo is considered escaped if she enters into that habitat over there. She's walking right up and having no problems. And they're walking right up and having no problems. I'm pretty sure this didn't used to work. And yet, she's not escaped. Alrighty. So there's an option for us. Of course, another option is to do this. Like I said, I have run into the past. Of course, now I need to double check it because apparently we can do some funky things. There is a certain point where you've added too many borders and in too many different weird funky patterns and it goes, no, please don't. I can't calculate anymore. So, this is a possibility. It brings some interesting options because no matter what, we're going to have this habitat, really. At some point, we're going to have to contain more staff buildings in it. Because if we're going to have lions and tigers and bears, all three of those things are going to need to get fed. So you'd probably want to put a keeper hut somewhere around here. So will the keeper located in the keeper hut inside of the habitat address the habitat that they're already in? I don't know. So it's bringing some fascinating options is what I'm saying here. Like, never quite had to... I've pushed the boundaries of barriers. I've never done this. Never successfully. So, anyway, with this going on, let's go ahead and look at what we're going to be building. So I'm focusing right now on this part of the challenge, this first part. I've already worked out quite a bit of what to do for this second part. So, first one, basic challenge. We are looking for a convincing formal Renaissance garden complete with center gazebo. Now, I have over here... Oop, there we go. I have over here pulled up formal Renaissance garden. It's the first thing I Googled. And immediately, two things come to the forefront. There's the French-style Renaissance garden and the Italian-style Renaissance garden. And you can immediately tell that while there's a lot of similarities, there are also a lot of differences. In the Italian style, of course, you know, we see that we have a lot more of these sort of block edges, thick hedgerows, which is shared with the French style. But the French style appears to be a little bit more willing to do these sort of flowing green lawns, which I find very interesting. Now, in our zoo that we're going to do this for, this style says more Italian to me. It's really somewhere between. It's not French and it's not really Italian. And it's not really British either, though it almost wants to be. It's sort of this hodgepodge. And again, part of this is just coming from the fact that I'm an American attempting to replicate something from 3 countries I've never been to. So there's going to be some oddities. But we have the ivy, of course. And like I said, I built this months ago. So if we're talking about the French style, then we would want to keep this lawn. And let's get out our concrete. And I don't like that color, so let's do something a little bit more like that. Yep. There we go. And essentially what we would end up doing is using our little concrete paths. I hate it when it does this. To make these kind of swooping designs. Right, that then we would fill in various places in order to create these kinds of swirling effects. And of course this is a very rough draft. Right. So that would be kind of the proof of concept there. On the other hand, if we want to stick with the purely Italian style, it's going to be a lot of hedgerows. And I'm just setting down a layer real quick. Of course it's not clean. And instead of using grass, we would probably turn to something more like coarse sand. Of course on this biome that looks terrible, so maybe something like pale sand. Fine sand? That thing. And then going from there, there's some stylistic differences, but I can't see enough of them to really immediately pick them out. I guess it's more that there's a little bit more favoring of mathematical lines and infill, whereas with this it's very flowy. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. So what we might do is both a French and Italian style garden. But we can't just get hung up on the garden side, because that would be too simple. No. We have to also consider, now we're moving into Baroque, but this waterfall style. So I do want to have some kind of nice waterfall, and so does 3DPDK. So we have this sporting water fountain tribute to the birds found in the garden. That sounds fantastic, of course. And then, of course, you know, all the bits and bobs that go with it. And then complete with center gazebo. Now this is where things get interesting, because normally gardens feature a center fountain, not a center gazebo. And so I think what I might end up doing is branching away from pure European. Give me 1 second. So this is a Japanese game based on Hawaii. So Ula Ula Gardens is not quite what I'm looking for precisely. But you see how they've got like kind of something of a gazebo that's sort of featured in the middle of the lake. So what I'm thinking is, let's do terrain stamp cylinder. Let's subtract. Let's make it a little bit more shallow, right? Okay. We don't want this too big. So this is not staying. So I'm not gonna do it very nicely. So we'll do a lake and then add in the center. Let's do a little bit bigger. There we go. And here we go. So we're not using this gazebo because this was made for my Japanese hot springs and it looks wrong with this style. But very likely I will end up converting bits of it, possibly replacing the roof. We might keep this same base, just change out the flooring. We'll get rid of the red throughout here because it doesn't make sense in this setting. This roof is just way too harsh for this climb. But yeah, basically something like this. And then let's just... Of course it would be intersecting terrain, come on. There we go. Alright. And then of course the sculpting's not really gonna work, but we can try it. Something a little bit more like that. But obviously a little bit more, you know, even and circular. Something that looks a little bit like it was deliberate. That's a little bit better. That'll be our fountain. And then in these quadrants, we will have birds. So let's talk bird statues. So obviously the most amazing statues we're going to get in the game are usually from the aquatic pack, just because they have so much character to them. But that's not really what we're looking for right now. So the bad news is that we don't have a statue dedicated for the mute swan. Good news is we do for the flamingo. And we kind of do for the peacock. But of course they're all in vastly different styles. Now, short of opening up Blender and making a mod to add in new statues into the game, the next best thing that we have is going to be to either model our own statuary, which might be very fun, or to make... no, the more I think about it, the more we're just gonna have to build our own statuary. I don't really want to go for the workshop, simply because then it wouldn't be my own work. And while I support the workshop, and I'm happy it exists, and I'm happy to contribute to it, this doesn't feel like something to cop out on. So we would end up going into our rounded shapes. I will say, for people who do not want to put in the amount of effort I'm about to put in, Drax. Wonderful Drax. This is not his only bird. Bird? He's made several of these. We don't even have the right birds for this, but like, look at this. Do you want a roadrunner? There it is. Do you want an Indian condor? I'm not even sure what pieces he used. And that is part of the reason I want to pull this out. So, African knot rope. Painted metal rod thin curved. I didn't know that was in the game. European LED tube end cap. These are made out of East Asia rooftoppers. And this is kind of the benefit of going through and just figuring out like how other people have done it, is that you just see all the crazy things that they've used. Like this is a decorative egg prop. And then of course a lot of commas. Commas are your friend. So, he's also got a fish and aquarium set. You know, just in case you wanted something like that in game. So, fish. All kinds of good stuff. I've made my own salmon before, so I'm not a stranger to doing this kind of modeling work. But I will say, this isn't what I expected to be doing with my night. Yeah, we're gonna run into a lot of that. And that. And that. A little bit of that. So, this is going to be difficult, and I'm not capturing it all on camera because... I mean, it would just be non-stop. Here's a spoiler for something I'm doing right now. That probably won't be out by the time that this video gets launched. You're not gonna guess what it's for. But anyway, that exists. So, alright, I've waffled enough. Let's get to work. Mm-hmm.